Hello. I know you probably don't think about me as much as I find myself thinking about you. I don't want to make you feel like you should be thinking about me. You are somewhere else, and even if you are, even if you are, you're still here with me. I always keep wondering, do you miss me like I miss you? Shuichi, the teacher called out, breaking his focus on the letter. He looked up to his teacher and saw that she looked angry. You need to pay attention. I know you have a situation at home, but that doesn't mean that you always get to have a cushion while the other students are working hard. Shuichi just gave her a cold stare. She was right. Shuichi was letting his situation get the best of him. But he couldn't help it. He missed him more than anything, and his death was one of the few things that stuck with Shuichi. For longer than they said it would. All right, he said quietly. The teacher scoffed and went back to the lesson. Shuichi blankly stared at the notebook that his and his past lover used to write each other in. Every day in class, they would pass it around like an ongoing note, their own private conversation just for them, untouched by the words of others. But after he passed on, Shuichi hasn't felt the same. Everything seems more plain to him, almost like the world was fading to gray, and maybe even to black someday. He hated having to continue on without his lover. They were labeled as freaks by all the others, but he didn't mind. Neither of them did. They embraced it and showed off their freaky side to one another, embracing who they wanted to be, like a prized treasure finally uncovered. Together, they felt found, even when the whole world seemed to lose them, making them feel lost and alone until they met one another. He stared back down at the notebook, looking at his writing on his own page. The other page was blank for a moment, before there was some writing that appeared on the page. Shuichi was surprised by this and looked down at the writing. Hello, love. Sorry I had to leave you, but it wasn't me that wanted to leave. They took me from you and I'm trapped here. But I know a way I can get back to you. You just have to be patient, my love. What? He asked, tracing his fingers over the letters. Is this real? He asked, looking over the letters again. Shuichi, his teacher said, tapping his shoulder again. He hummed, looking up at his teacher. Class is over, the teacher said with a sigh. She smiled at Shuichi while he slowly moved out of his seat. His eyes were glued to his notebook. He was amazed that there was new writing, but he had no idea how it was possible. What are you writing, Shuichi? I thought you hated English, she said, reaching for the notebook. Shuichi looked at her with a cold glare. Don't touch my notebook, he said, feeling defensive about his past lover and the possible connection they could have. Okay, she said, sounding a little shaky. Shuichi didn't even acknowledge her and walk out of the classroom. The hallways were empty, mostly because it was already well into lunch period. Shuichi couldn't care less either way. He was so consumed by reading the note his past lover left him. He read over the letters over and over again until it was almost cemented in his brain, playing over the memories of the times they were with one another. Love and devotion was all they had for each other. They had each other, and that's all they would ever need, until one left, leaving the other one lost and alone. How are you writing me? I thought you left all that time ago. Where are you? I'll go anywhere to find you. Please come back to me. He wrote back in the notebook as the world faded around him, just into a dim noise that he brushed off. Shuichi, what are you? A student started, before Shuichi just walked past the other student. He only cared about the response he could get. He walked all the way to the graveyard where Kokichi supposedly was. There was a gravestone of his past lover, the past person he knew so well, before even that went away, like the memory, the reality of them. Kokichi, he whispered, kneeling in front of the gravestone. It said in dark letters engraved on the stone, Here lies Kokichi Oma. Shuichi felt guilt come over his shoulders. He felt like it was his fault that Kokichi was no longer here. The funeral was a blur in his memory. Living without him was becoming unbearable. Don't cry, my beloved. He flinched when he saw the writing on the notebook. Kokichi? He called out, looking around him before more writing appeared. You need to expose the truth. Then I will no longer be trapped, and we can be together again, my love. What? He said blankly, looking down at the writing. Expose the truth? He asked, slowly standing up and looking over to the tree that was in the distance. It almost seemed like someone was waiting there. But for who? Why? Shuichi thought as he slowly walked over here. They seemed to be having a conversation of their own, and Shuichi was already curious, so he got as close as he could without being detected, of course. They seemed to be talking to a younger male. 2 men in black suits looking down at the boy with a bright light shining next to him. Shuichi felt confused, as anyone else would. Who was that? He seemed to think to himself as he hid behind the tree, hearing what they were saying. So the transformation should almost be complete. One of the men said to the other. Yes, only a few days remain before it's complete, and we will have made the first Zainat with a mind of its own. Shuichi flinched at the words. They created a Zainat? But I thought it was banned from being done after what happened 20 years ago. He thought to himself before looking down at the notebook. There was more writing. Be careful. These men aren't who you think they are. And don't talk to the boy. Please, Shumai. Remember me. You love me, right? Shuichi was confused by the words written. How could he forget? He loved Kokichi. Sure, he hasn't been around for 2 years now, but that doesn't mean he loves him any less. What do you mean? He wrote back before he heard the men talking again. So how are you feeling? One of them asked the boy. The boy perked up and stood up after hearing them. Well, I'm feeling amazing, he added. Nishishi? Kokichi? Shuichi asked, getting a better look at the boy. He looked just like Kokichi, but he didn't have one of the scars Kokichi had on his face. Well, he found this out a little too late when the boy spotted him. What do we have here? He teased, walking over to Shuichi, who was still holding the notebook close to his chest. He started before the boy grabbed his hand. Look, isn't this the one Kokichi asked for? He asked with a smirk. The men seemed to smile at this, and they grabbed Shuichi's shoulders before a cloth came over his mouth. Shuichi! Shuichi heard a voice call out from the darkness. He was confused as he slowly opened his eyes. He heard the sounds of chains, and soon smelt the small... I can't read. Shuichi! Shuichi heard a voice call out from the darkness. He was confused as he slowly opened his eyes. He heard the sound of chains and soon smelt the strong smell of blood. After he felt his senses come back to him, he felt arms wrap around him. He looked down to see Kokichi hugging him. Kokichi? He asked before Kokichi pulled away. This was the Kokichi he knew and loved, but he wanted to know why he found him after all this time. He thought he was dead. Shuichi, oh my god, I missed you, he exclaimed, pulling back to look him in the eyes. Shuichi felt tears coming to his eyes. He didn't mind that Kokichi looked awful. Bruises littered his body, and his face had the scar he knew so well, along with some stitches across it. Why didn't you tell me you were still here? He asked, tears falling down his cheeks. Kokichi gently brushed his fingers over his cheeks and smiled. I couldn't tell you because they wanted me to. He started before he was cut off by one of the men coming into the room. Isn't this lovely, Kimichi? One of them asked as the boy came out again and moved to grab Shuichi's chin. Shuichi tried to move away, only to get shocked by a chain collar around his neck. They were both chained to the wall behind them by their feet and necks. Yes, maybe we can make another one of my beloved, he said, snapping back his hand, making Shuichi flinch. Kokichi held him close to him before Kimichi moved over to them. Don't you dare make him go through what you have done to me, Kokichi screamed as he came over and grabbed the notebook away from Shuichi, who was now looking at the boy with a glare. Oh, so cold, Shu. he teased with a laugh. Before Shuichi could respond, he turned to Kokichi. You know what it means if I rip the notebook, right? He said teasingly, tearing one of the pages. Kokichi screamed at this and held his cheek, which the skin was now cracking like glass under his fingers. Don't, please stop! Shuichi exclaimed as he tore out the page. Kokichi's cheek was shattered and bleeding all over his hand. Shui... He paused for a moment, catching his breath. Kamichi grabbed both sides of the notebook and started tearing the whole notebook apart. I love you, he gasped before he pulled Shuichi into a kiss. Shuichi kissed back and held on to the smaller male as he shattered under his fingers. The fragments of his body fell to the floor before bursting into stars that soon faded from view. He kissed him until his lips fell into the pile and faded into nothing. What have you done? He said, looking down at the shirt that was still in his hands. Well, now you can both be united in the empty shells of his net. He laughed before there was a man in doctor's clothing coming over to Shuichi. Shuichi just closed his eyes and muttered one final phrase before they killed him. I'm glad I got to kiss you one last time, but now there's no point. You are really gone. This was the end of Shuichi and Kokichi, the two lovers who knew loss better than anyone else.